All right, guys. Well, thanks for tuning in tonight. We'll get started. And if you see people sitting in the waiting room, maybe just spam the chat and I'll try to let them in. Um, but yeah, so tonight we're going to be talking about stress, specifically about what it does to you, and how to overcome it and how we can use stress as a tool to get stronger. If you don't know me, my name is Drake. I'm a kinesiologist. I've been working at Total Body Health for just about a year now. I did my school at UVic. I'm also a certified strength and conditioning coach. And since sort of joining the Total Body Health team, I've been doing a lot of work with DNS and all the teachings that I've gotten from Michael. The work I do essentially one-on-one rehab exercise-based sessions where I basically help my clients feel and move better. I help them get strong, and I help them teach them how to move their bodies. Okay, let's see here. So why should we care? So two reasons. Well, we'll talk about two reasons here. First is for your health. So pretty staggering figure here. 60 to 80% of primary healthcare visits, that's like general medical system, are due to complications linked to chronic stress or an acute stress event. So that's pretty crazy. So as we'll sort of talk about through this talk, stress has pretty profound effects on basically all your systems, and they take a toll if not managed properly. Second reason why we should sort of care is for growth. Stress is what drives adaptation, whether that's for better or worse, but we hope to sort of harness it and use it as a gain. Stress is what forced humans to evolve the way we have. We have had stressors on our species for thousands of years that have sort of shaped us into what we are now. Stress drives excellence. Here are sort of a list of, or demonstration of people or occupations that I really think of when I think of people that have truly mastered their bodies and their ability to control stress. So on the far left, that's, I wouldn't say a hero of mine, but someone I look up to as a climber. His name's Alex Honnold. And this is a picture of him free soloing, so climbing without a rope, a route called Free Rider on the mountain of El Capitan. That's 2,900 feet of vertical, difficult rock climbing with no rope. You know, that is an incredibly stressful thing to do, and he has managed to control his body to perform in that environment. Other people that have sort of have similar skill set, surgeons, you know, you've got a life in your hands and you need to perform. You need to be able to have enough control with your brain to make your hands do exactly what they want with no mistakes. Firefighters, soldiers, similar story. Incredibly stressful occupations, but perform. And they've had training that has prepped them for that. But at the end of the day, they have gotten a connection with their brain to their body that forces them to perform perfectly in these situations. And then sort of a pretty unique case, bottom right corner, David Blaine. I think this was over 10 years ago, but he spent an entire week underwater. He didn't eat, he didn't go to the bathroom, he didn't come up. He spent an entire week underwater. Of course, he had oxygen, you need that, but you can imagine what his body was saying to his brain, and he was able to overcome that. So what is stress? Pretty basic definition here. The state of mental, emotional, or physical strain or tension resulting from adverse or very demanding circumstances. And that can vary, and everyone will have their own definition of what an adverse or very demanding circumstance is. Where does stress come from? Everywhere. You can have money problems. That's stressful. I know those problems. You can have stress from a relationship that will sort of, keep you up at night. Overloaded at work, boss putting way too much on you, tight deadlines, stressful. I think something we can all relate to over the last couple of years is COVID, especially during the lockdown. There was a lot of uncertainty. We couldn't see our friends, didn't really know who to trust. Media was telling us different things. Stressful. Exercise. Not all stress is bad, but exercise puts a stress on the body. And this is just one that the body's quite good at adapting to, and it's a tool we can use. And then, conflict, military training, getting yelled at, physical conflict. These are all sort of places that stress can come from. And the list is endless. But one thing I do want to note is that there are some types of stress or experiences that we cannot prepare for. There are some things that are just very bad that happen to us, and that's not really what I'm talking about in this talk. I'm not promising or saying that these sort of strategies I'm talking about today will allow you to overcome something like abuse. It might help, but there are some things that are just too much out there. Just wanted to disclaimer that. So when we're talking about stress, we're talking a lot about the nervous system. So the nervous system is what sort of drives stress. So here we sort of have a chart. On the left, central nervous system, that's essentially tissue of your brain and spinal cord. Then we have the peripheral nervous system. What this does is it connects the brain to the rest of our body. So these are all the nerves that sort of run from your spinal cord or your brain out to the tips of your fingers. And those sort of have different roles. So there's sensory, and that's pretty self-explanatory. This is how we sort of take in the environment, sort of sense of touch, sense of vision, temperature, these sort of things, pressure. And then there's motor. So this is how we move. And there's autonomic movement. So this is sort of things that we don't have to think about, like your heartbeat, like digestion, like breathing. And then there's somatic. So this is like voluntary physical movement. You want to walk over there, your brain tells your muscles to move over there. That's your somatic system. And then sort of what we're focusing on today is a sort of breakdown under the autonomic is the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system. So sort of simply put, sympathetic is your fight or flight type nervous system, while your parasympathetic is your rest and digest. And sort of day to day, these two nervous systems sort of live in balance and they keep each other in check. While you're sleeping, your sympathetic nervous system will be reduced and your parasympathetic nervous system will be increased, resting and digestion. When something stressful happens, your sympathetic nervous system is what drives this response. And it's the relationship between these two nervous systems that dictate sort of how we respond to different stimuli. So these diagrams can be a bit busy, but it's just sort of demonstrating the roles of the different nervous systems on the left. So you can see here with sympathetic activity on our left diagram, it will increase heart rate, slow digestion, stimulate glucose release. These are all things that are important to us when something stressful is happening. And then sort of all the inverse is happening with the parasympathetic system. A big note here is that when we talk about the stress response, is that it is a general response. The stress response is not specialized and it does not really know, it's kind of like a all or none. It doesn't know the difference between something that's mildly stressful and that's very stressful, or the reason why it's stressful. So sort of an example is the exact same system is happening when I am being chased by a grizzly bear, or say was doing some really stressful test, probably one of my chemistry final exams in my undergrad. Exact same system working. So you can sort of see how you don't really want to be in a state of being chased by a grizzly bear all the time. It's not healthy to be like that all the time. So just sort of, yeah, that's okay. We'll move on. So risks of prolonged stress. So as I said, the stress response will affect all the systems, but just I'll touch on a couple here. So first, your cardiovascular system, so your heart and all your blood vessels. Which happens here is you will get basically a lot of strain on your heart and blood vessels. They're working way harder than they need to be, sort of. And this basically puts you at increased risk for hypertension, which is high blood pressure, heart attack, stroke, cardiovascular disease, basically because your cardiovascular system's in overdrive. Your blood vessels sort of direct blood away from your unnecessary systems or resources and put them towards your muscle and to your brain. It increases alertness. It makes your muscles ready to go. It takes away from your digestive system. It takes away from your hormones. It takes away from your immune system. In terms of digestion, there's lots of effects here too. Interestingly, we have a neural connection with our brain and our digestive system. You sort of feel, that when you feel butterflies before something you're excited about or something you're nervous about, that's sort of a direct connection with your brain to your digestive system here. So it makes sense that stress will have an effect on here. So, problems with prolonged stress, impaired digestion and nutrient absorption, bloating, abdominal discomfort, pain, extreme cases, you can have vomiting, and basically you're just much more likely to experience these symptoms. Lastly, skeletal muscle system. A kind of quick little thing to think about is a stressed body is a tight body. If you've ever heard of muscle guarding, it's basically a protective mechanism where all your muscles contract and tighten up as sort of a way to protect, bracing for impact. This sort of chronic stress or guarding leads to stiffness, impaired movement patterns, which can lead to further injury, pain, and other tension-related disorders, such as like tension headaches. Sort of just building on this, sure we've all felt, can relate to when you're being stressed, you get tight in the upper back. You ever someone coming up to you and sort of grab your shoulders, be like, you're stressed, and feeling like you're rock hard traps. That's super common and very normal. So here we have a graph showing EMG activity. So it's basically just electrical activity of the muscle at rest and then under different stressors. So on the left, we can see there's sort of a standard baseline EMG of about 30% in this case, which is the white box. And then you can see that there is a, 25% increase in activity just from doing some math. This was a math problem in this study that they gave them. And then another thing they looked at was a color word test, basically just a mental test, but you can still see there's an increase in tension of the muscles sort of around your upper neck and back. And then on the right graph, you can look at sort of this is a more physical response. So EMG activity of the trapezius muscle. So again, around 30%. And then a cold pressure test, which is basically just putting your hand in ice cold water. That elicits a stress response. And then you can see that EMG activity goes up to close to 80%. That's a 50% increase in activity of your traps for no apparent reason. It's the stress response that's doing that. Moving on, there's some pretty cool research. I guess like all sort of things with the human body is lots of it's done on rats. So this rat study basically took two groups of rats and they were connected. So one was able to run on a wheel whenever it wanted. It was not pressured to. It could just exercise when it wanted. And then rat B was forced to exercise whenever rat A was exercising. So it's the exact same amount of exercise. Just one got to choose when it got to do it, and the other was forced. It was unpredictable. They couldn't do anything about it. They were not in control. So you just sort of, you might think that, it's the same amount of exercise, you'll see the same response. No, that's not what happened. Rat A group, voluntary movers, saw general adaptation that you'd expect to see from exercise. Increase in fitness, they seemed settled, behaved normally. Meanwhile, the group B that was not in control basically had a lot of the markers of stress: interrupted sleep patterns, poor digestion, lack of a appetite, unsettled weight loss, just sporadic behaviors. So this tells us a few things, is that forced unenjoyable exercise is just not beneficial when we're talking about stress. You don't really see the same positive adaptations to exercise when it's forced in this way. Second is that being in control or having a sense of control matters. So here we're sort of building a picture that context matters, and the way in which we interpret a stimulus makes a difference in how our body responds to that stimulus. So, like I said before, everyone likes to be in control when we're talking about stress. Situations that we cannot control or cannot predict tend to be more stressful than ones that we can control and can predict. Sort of talking about control, sometimes it's hard to control a situation. If you could control the situation, you wouldn't be stressed. But there's things about it that we can control. So just sort of thinking is you can control sort of how involved you are in the situation. Are you able to step back? You can control how much energy you put into a given situation. Sorry, just letting in Lori here. And then there's other things you can't control, but the point is that it's important to have sort of a sense of control or sort of handle on a situation versus it just being totally out there and out of your ability to influence. So sort of building on that and the context that I was talking about is the way we think about an experience completely changes the way we can learn about it. So this is a quote from Sam Harris, who is a famous philosopher and neuroscientist. So that's sort of talking about what I was before with the rats. They had a certain thought about the way that they were being exposed to the exercise, and that drastically influenced the way that they responded to it. So you're stressed. Happens. How can we de-stress ourselves? How can we calm down? First of all, is recognize that you are stressed out. This can be really hard to do. We sort of live in a state of stress all the time. So listen to your body, listen to those around you. Someone says, hey, you seem really stressed, take it serious. Don't just brush it off. Take control of what you can. Take a step away if possible. So whatever that stressor is, see how you can modify it. Sometimes just saying, like, say you're being overloaded at work, just saying your boss, hey, this is too much, I need help, will have a drastic effect on how it goes and how you respond to it moving forward. Find a method of de-stressing that works for you. And we'll sort of talk about options for these, but there's a lot. And then, like anything, practice. It takes practice calming ourselves down. It's not intuitive. It's not easy. So one tool that is particularly good for calming yourselves down is through breath work. And there's lots of strategies that we can use, but here I just have a couple. If you've ever worked with me in clinic, we've probably done some diaphragmatic breathing, and here's where I sort of get out my little crab claws, tell them to put them around your lower belly, and sort of breathe towards that space. And sort of doing this, putting this intention towards your breath, is a great way to get in tune with your body, and you can actually influence your parasympathetic and your sympathetic nervous system through your breath. Sort of should have touched on earlier, but there's patterns in breath that we see when an individual is stressed, and that is a rapid, shallow breath directed to the chest, sort of hyperventilating style. That's a stressed breath. We can do the opposite with something like diaphragmatic breathing. Long, controlled inhales and exhales directed towards the abdomen instead of the chest. Sort of another tool that's a little more defined is a tool from Dr. Andrew Huberman, who is a professor of neuroscience at Stanford. He's done some research on a thing called a physiological sigh, and I'm not going to get too much into the physiology, but this is basically a very efficient breath for offloading carbon dioxide, which will help with the stress response. It will decrease your sympathetic nervous system activity. So the way that this one works, and we can do it together, is an inhale followed by a second quick inhale, and then a long exhale. So it's kind of like, so in again, and then 6 seconds out. And this breath is very efficient at offloading carbon dioxide. And it's good because Andrew Huberman's research has shown that this will have a pretty dramatic response with just 1 or 2 breaths. So this is a good tool that you can do in the moment. You don't need to be removed. You don't need to go lie down on the floor and do diaphragmatic breathing. You can do a few of these and then change the blood, like the concentration of carbon dioxide in your bloodstream, and feel better with just 1 or 2 breaths. So it's a pretty cool tool. Other ways you can de-stress, there's tons of people, tons of research shows meditation, getting out in nature, looking into a dog's eye. I know my physics teacher in high school was super into this. He'd bring his dog in on test day and she'd just wander around, and apparently he saw increase in grades from that, just his own little personal experiment. Exercise, music, lots of tools. Find what works for you. There's lots of options. And then how do we build from this? And when we talk about our ability to sort of be more immune to stress or resistant to it, is building resilience. So the ability to recover from or adjust easily to misfortune or change. So how do we train resilience? So like anything, there's sort of principles, like training our muscles. There's principles that we can follow. So general principles of training. So this is sort of a typical exercise-based list, but it's still relevant here. So principle of progressive overload and gradual exposure. So you need to start where you are. You can't just immediately, like I'm not a runner. If I try to run 10K tomorrow, I'll hurt myself. That's not a good progression. I need to sort of gradually build to it. It's the same when sort of building your tolerance to stress. You need to be regular with your training. This can't just be a one and done or a once a month consistency. Specificity of training needs to be relatively specific to the goal you're trying to achieve, right? It needs to be sort of related to your desired outcome. It needs to be individual, so it needs to work for you. Not a program that works for, an NFL athlete is not going to work for me. Different baselines, different people. It needs to be right for you. Reversibility, so this is kind of use it or lose it. Overtraining, you can overdo it. You can go through your progressive overload, your gradual exposure too quickly. you can overtrain and you can have injury there. And then sort of considerations for sort of training resilience specifically is challenge your sense of control. So like we talked about with the rats, you like to be in control, but we can sort of work and nudge on that sense of control, gradually go into situations we control a little bit less, put ourselves into environments where we're a little less comfortable. Search for new challenges. Keep your body adaptable. Try new things. Avoid comparing yourselves to other. This is pretty general, but it's not helpful. Focus on yourself. Don't worry about what other people are doing. Remember what you're trying to achieve. This can be hard with sort of when you're talking about building resilience because the adaptation or the change is not so visible. When you go to the gym, it's fairly easy to see numbers on a scale go down or visible difference in your appearance or increase in your lifts. It's not so easy when we're talking about our ability to adapt to stress. So just take time to reflect on where you've come from, how you would have responded to this event in the past versus how you did now. Just check in on yourself. So here's sort of two opposite ends of the spectrum. So on the left, we see a dog that is unable to control his body. His mind is not able to sort of overpower his body's desires. He's going up on the counter for the cookies. Meanwhile, the complete opposite, a service dog. They are like an excellent example of the ability to control the body's urges. The brain is stronger than the body. And this is sort of what we sort of want to work to achieve here. So when sort of going through a couple protocols to follow, what we're going to do is we can train the brain by challenging the body. So we're going to put the body in uncomfortable situations and force the brain to adapt and overcome and keep telling the body to keep going. Sort of little pause, sort of moving forward. A quote that I like is the hardest thing you've ever done is the hardest thing you've ever done. Right? You know, there's nothing harder than the hardest thing you've ever done. And you've already done it, right? You've done it, you've been there, you overcame it. Good work, right? So how can we control our minds? This is sort of what I was talking about before. We're challenging the body to change the brain. One way to do that is through exercise. Exercise is awesome, you know, push yourself hard. You know, if you've ever done a really hard workout, you've probably felt that your muscles are begging you to quit. But you hopefully overcame that and pushed through it. And that pushing is training resilience. That ability to sort of say, no muscles, you have more. That's what we sort of want to achieve here. And that ability to have our brain control our body is the exact same thing as sort of being able to adapt to stress. We're able to sort of tell your body to calm down. No, this is okay. Make sure the brain is stronger. Another really sort of unique way to challenge the body is through deliberate cold exposure. So the cold exposure is probably one of the hardest things you can do to yourself. It's way harder than pushing yourself in a workout. It's painful. It's very unpleasant, but it's an awesome way to challenge your brain. Your body will be crying to get out and get warm, but it's an awesome opportunity for you to push yourself and fight through the cold. So I have a challenge for you. 11 minutes per week of deliberate cold exposure. I don't care how you break it up, but I'm giving you a quota of 11 minutes per week, so per 7 days. Like I said, frequency you choose. How cold? You should be saying, oh my God, this is so cold. but I'm not doing myself physical harm. So you can be very uncomfortable, but as long as you can sort of feel that you're not going to die, you're probably in an okay temperature, and that will sort of influence depending on the person. How to do it: cold shower, cold bath. Submersion is the best, like in this picture here. But do what you can, Here on the island, got a cold ocean. Go jump in it. Or you can just go outside underdressed and shiver for a while. Doesn't matter. But forcing yourself in the cold is an excellent way to sort of train the brain to overcome what the body is sort of begging of it. Another sort of one that I've sort of made up is embrace the suck. Hard times offer an opportunity to grow. Accept each experience for what it has to offer and see if you can grow from that. So there's some pictures of me here, and all of these are from particularly hard times, but things that I value in my life. So on the left, that is me on a mountain course during the heat dome of last year. So this was in June. If you haven't been in the mountains, yes, we have snow long or deep into the summer in the mountains up on the island. So it was, I don't know the exact temperature, but we all lived through it. It was crazy hot. And up there, so exposed, we were very exposed to the UV rays. It was just, you could see it bouncing off the snow if you sort of ever sort of seen heat or felt sun like that. I burned my eyeballs, which sucked. But I dug deep on that course. That was very physically hard. We were all sort of suffering, but I pushed through and learned a lot, met great people, learned awesome skills that I hope to apply soon, and sort of embraced it. I don't have bad memories about that trip. Sort of the opposite, still in the snow, but this is very cold. If you ever done winter camping, it's kind of just being sad, sort of until you wake up and get to do your activity. You go skiing during the day, you come back to camp and you sit and be sad for a while until you can wake up and do it again the next morning. I think that sort of like we talked about with the cold, this is just an awesome way to challenge the body. Last one is from field exercise in my basic military training. By far the hardest thing I've ever done. Military experience is super unique. But they sort of base their whole philosophy on pushing you as hard as you can and forcing you to grow from that. That's sort of the military way of training. And, though it's a bit extreme, I really think it works. I value the lessons I learned from that experience. I feel like a stronger person when sort of other things happen in my day-to-day life. They don't feel as bad. I think that my military training and sort of training in the mountains and everything else really helped build my resilience to adapt to stress. So we grow when we get comfortable being uncomfortable. Sort of talking about what I was saying before. So this is a quote from Michael Gervais. He is a psychologist who studied people at the top of their game. So like the Tom Brady's of the world, the Michael Jordans, business gurus, everyone who is the best at their craft, this guy studies. And he sort of come to a pattern that, sort of pushing through hard times, learning from everything that you do, is sort of a common trait from all of these people. It's even like made it into pop culture. What doesn't kill you makes you stronger. It makes you stand a little taller. From Kelly Clarkson. We've all heard that song. She's got the idea, right? Same story. Challenging the body forces the brain to adapt, and that's how we grow. So takeaways from this talk. So if you've been listening to me for however long this was, I don't even know. Sort of, these are the things I want you to learn. The brain has a direct connection or ability to control the activity of our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous systems. So our stress response. So our brain, we are able to, if we practice, can control how our body reacts to different stimulus. The way our bodies respond to stress is based off our prior experience and training. So it's based off what stressors we've had in the past. It's based off of what we've sort of done to train our resilience, our previous experiences. It sort of goes back to it, sort of the hardest thing you've ever done is the hardest thing you've ever done. If you do something that's, 7 out of 10 on that hard scale, your brain remembers when you did 10 out of 10. It goes, not so bad. We've done worse. And then lastly, sort of the biggest takeaway is you must expose yourself to stress in order to better adapt to stress. So we need to push ourselves through stressful situations if we want any chance of better handling stressful situations. Okay, that's it for me. Here's an opportunity if anyone has any questions or comments. Feel free to unmute yourself and I'll try my best to answer it.
Yo, it's Carter here.
Hey.
So yeah, I thought your presentation was I think I got a lot out of it, like the whole philosophy of things being hard. And I mean, I might actually be motivated to like finally go and exercise because I like don't exercise at all and do some hard stuff. So my question would be like, what is like a good starting place if I wanted to like start doing like physically hard stuff?
So like I said before, when we sort of talked about like things like this here. So there's lots of things to think about. So you need to think about your baseline. So if you're talking about fitness, what is your baseline level of fitness? And you need to make sure you don't start too far above that. And you want to choose something that is sort of related to what you eventually want out of it. So if it's sort of just exercise based, think about what your exercise goal is. If you want, more endurance, you want to be able to run, do running. If you want to get stronger, go to the gym. And there I would sort of, you go where to start. And I'd say book an appointment with me. Something like that, talk to someone or get some coaching on place to start. If you're talking about just pushing your body, do my challenge. 11 minutes a week of cold. Have fun. It sucks, but have fun.
I can chime in here. It absolutely sucks, but it's unfortunately really good for you. Crocheting a nice warm blanket, not thinking about it. But yes, it does actually work. Drake's forced me to do this multiple times. No, sorry, not forced me. Highly encouraged me to do this. And it does actually, I feel like it definitely trains your brain and it does get easier.
Exactly. Does that answer your question, Carter?
Yeah, that answers it. Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Anyone else?
Is my mic on?
I hear you.
Do you have a 10 out of 10 experience that you think back to when something really sucks and you're going, well, at least it's not like this? What's your benchmark of suckage?
Day 3, no sleep in a trench in Wainwright last summer. Was my 10 out of 10, physically not being allowed to sleep, being woken up, military training environment. Horrible. Sleep deprivation is a mean thing. And that's my 10. Other sort of close calls. I don't know. I've been in the mountains with you enough. We've had some pretty hard times together, I think.
We've had some 9s.
Yeah, some 9s for sure. But this is sort of a fun exercise because actually just sort of put it out the top of my head. I couldn't exactly think of instantly maybe I did, but what your 10 is. but maybe
Mhm.
that's a sort of a fun exercise, is sort of reflect on what your 10 was, and, keep that in mind when hard things come, think, well, it's not as hard as that was.
For sure.
Yeah. Anybody else? No? All right. Well, thanks for listening. Hopefully you learned something. Hopefully you can find some ways to apply this to your life. I strongly encourage everyone to try my cold exposure challenge. I think you'll have fun with it. At least in my brain, it's fun to sort of push and sort of learn what you're able to do. So yeah, I'm going to end it here. So hope everyone has a good night, and